right now on the 6 o'clock news.
So there you have it, history in action. Pro and anti-Trump forces lined up outside Trump Towers. We've seen time and time again over, 7-8 years now at this point, plus. Pretty fascinating. You heard him mention he's going to a dinner tonight. Obviously, now we're going to start fundraising off this in earnest as we really see the presidential campaign heat up. This is going to basically be potentially the defining issue of the campaign.
It'll absolutely be one of the defining issues of the campaign, and both sides are being very aggressive with fundraising. You saw Biden's tweet, or X, where he said that, the only way to stop this man is to donate here, and Trump apparently sent out a message on Truth Social that he's a political prisoner right after the verdict was read, and we all need to donate now. And I think a lot of people are going to be using this to either prove their point or disprove the other side.
It's interesting you bring that up, because this does very little to inflame the Democratic base. They already hate Trump. So when we're looking at people that are independents or undecided, what do you think this does?
I think it's going to push people really strongly one way or the other. I think the independents and the undecideds might think that Trump absolutely was scapegoated and is a political prisoner, and it'll push them towards him. I think it might push other people and say, oh my God, he tried to trick the American public and lie to us. I absolutely hate him. I am absolutely not voting for him. So Bianca, I think it can go either way.
Yeah, it's interesting. There has been some polling that there is a small portion of the persuadable electorate that would be moved by the idea of being a convicted felon. Like that was a step too far for a certain amount of people, which again, it all, we'll have to just wait and see at this point, basically. I want to ask the same question we asked Imran Ansari about what we expect to hear. Right now, by the way, we're waiting to hear from Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, expected to give some sort of press conference. Likely will be short. What would you expect to see from this press conference?
Well, you have to understand that Cy Vance originally tried to indict Trump on different charges than this and basically gave up after 2 years of convening grand juries, and some of the ADAs wrote books about it. So Alvin Bragg, give him credit. He saw an avenue, he saw a road, he convened a grand jury, he indicted Trump on
these... And it's interesting to even go further back into that. When he got into office, he sort of looked like he wasn't going to prosecute Trump. And then at some point did a 180. It was a very surprising twist of turn since he came into office, the past couple of years or so.
Absolutely. The grand jury is also a secret proceeding. So we have no idea what Bragg was doing behind closed doors, even if he was saying one thing to the public and maybe doing something else with the grand jurors. But I expect Bragg to come out and say this was a monumental case. They pushed democracy forward. They're very happy with the verdict. His DAs did a great job. The jury listened to the facts. The jury made the right decision, and he stands behind this conviction. That's what he's going to say.
Yeah. As a trial attorney, as maybe you're defending a client and you're not being told what the secondary charge was until after you read your closing statements, how do you react to something like that?
I think it absolutely goes to the appealable issues here, and I think it absolutely goes to the uphill battle that Todd Blanche and Trump's attorneys had, because the DA's office wasn't really forthcoming with, we're charging you with XYZ because of ABC. It was, well, it could be this, it could be that. You don't have to agree on this, you don't have to agree on that. You just have to agree that you don't like Donald Trump. And that's what I think the quick 11-hour, 2-day verdict told us, because Steve, as you said, I thought it was going to be a mixed verdict or a hung jury, or guilty on some, not guilty on others. 34 felony guilty counts for a former president.
Right, that shocked everyone, I think. We can say that for sure. We've got a split screen I can see right now. They are getting ready for the Alvin Bragg presser. It has not happened just yet, but we will bring you that as soon as it does. Certainly will be interesting to hear from him on this historic day. Again, if you just happen to be joining us right now, Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts he was charged with in the hush money trial here in Lower Manhattan. I've seen articles about the idea that the hush money was not the proper way to refer to this case. That it was more technically what they were charging was an election interference case. What are your thoughts on how it was branded and sort of became known as the hush money trial? Was that an appropriate way to respond to it, or branded, if you will, in the news media?
The news media branded a hush money trial to give a negative connotation to this trial. And everyone's calling it New York versus Donald Trump. In reality, it's the people of the state of New York versus Donald Trump. And in reality, it's just a campaign election trial. And by naming it the hush money trial and giving it the negative connotation that, oh my God, he paid off a porn star to trick the American people, and that's what this case is about. That's not what this case was about.
So wait, would things have been different if the internal notations were not written as a, legal expense? If you wrote it as something else, would we be here today?
No, we wouldn't be. He wrote as a legal expense, and that was, they're claiming, masking or disguising real campaign contributions in violation of this law and that law that they don't actually have to prove. But it was about bookkeeping, it was about handwritten notes, it was about the Trump Organization comptroller's testimony. I think all of that played a part. But again, as you said, it's a circumstantial case. They can convict on circumstantial evidence. That is how prosecutors prove cases all the time. But Steve, as you said, the fact that it was known as the hush money trial when it could have just been called Trump's criminal trial, the election trial, the campaign contribution trial, they were trying to put him in a negative light from the start, which is fine. You're allowed to do that, but is it unfair? Kind of.
All right, very well. Again, as we wait to hear from Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, we're going to take that live as soon as we get there. But in the meantime, we're going to go out to Jessica Formoso.
There would have been a concern that would have happened after we found out this shocking verdict. But, Cary, you mentioned something briefly right now. What was the cost of holding this trial here in New York, especially with DA Alvin Bragg bringing this?
In the tens of millions. The overtime for court officers, the overtime for outside security. I was speaking to court officers in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens who were brought into Manhattan for these 8 weeks for this trial. They went till 9 o'clock at night during closing statements. That means the court officers didn't leave until probably 11 or 12, which means the city was paying overtime to all of these city employees, in addition to the fact that they had to close multiple courtrooms. They had to combine multiple courtrooms for the security of obviously this trial. But the city needs money to clean it up, to clean up the crime, to clean up the dangerousness, and the city does not have tens of millions of extra dollars to spend on prosecuting an ex-president when we have a lot more violent crime. I mean, these are 34 non-violent paperwork crimes that cost the DA's office and the city of New York, I would estimate $20 million to prosecute at a minimum.
All right, indeed. That's your opinion, for sure. I mean, what's the alternative?
Well,
You can't prosecute in New York? I mean, right? What is the answer?
The answer...
I mean, we have a lot of money in New York. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, it was expensive, for sure. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but the fact that it costs money isn't right.
Or if it doesn't come out to the right, I guess their hopeful reaction is to hopefully that he will lose and the independents will not side with him. Then that is upsetting in the end, because if you don't,
right, I think we're confused. Right.
Yeah. The reason it was a waste of money is because it will be overturned on appeal. That's why.
Okay, that's the point. That's the point.
Yes.
You got it.
Because it's not going to stand.
Yes.
We're going to turn things over to Linda Schmidt, who is in Lower Manhattan, outside of the courthouse.